So Season 6 was a big one which had multiple problems behind the scenes, with constant script problems. Unlike the previous season, the quality of the serials was far more varied, with one of the most notoriously boring in the show's history, but at the same time had two of its greatest. The show for the most part moved away from Earth, with many varied locations across planets, spaceships, and even other dimensions. It's an enticing season because of that. So let's get into the serials to find out how they stacked up. The season opened with The Dominators, a serial which had both an odd length and wasn't that strong. It definitely has plenty of funny moments and some quite good characters, as well as commentary built into it, but it's nothing special, and a bit of a weak opening for the season. Next was The Mine Robber, one of the most interesting serials the show has ever given us, although the idea behind it was far more interesting than the execution. Plus it peaked with its opening episode, which used its main limitations to stand out. The invasion brought back the Cybermen and finally brought them to Earth in a big way. The serial does suffer from the problem of having very little Cybermen, but at the same time gives us one of, if not the best human villain so far. Beyond that, it also introduced Unit and set the groundwork for serials to come. Next is The Crotons, which was a bit of a dull one. Following up the invasion does hurt it, but it's relatively dull with uninteresting villains. Its only notable feature is the writer, but this is one of his weakest works. The Seeds of Death followed it up with the return of the Ice Warriors, with them regressing somewhat as they became less interesting and a bit more generic. It's not a bad serial, but it feels a bit slow in pace. The Space Pirates bored everyone who watched it. It has a somewhat interesting premise, but is completely uninteresting in execution and was basically a sacrificial lamb. It's dull to get through, and even worse, is almost certainly the most likely serial to ever be recovered out of spite. The War Games ended the season, and this era as a whole, with the second longest serial ever. It pulled out almost all the stops to give us one of the most ambitious serials so far, which finally introduced the Doctor's own people. It has its problems, but is an incredible serial, and perhaps a perfect way to end this era of the show. So to rank the serials, in last place is obviously the Space Pirates. Next is the Crotons, then the Dominators, the Seeds of Death, the Mind Robber, then in tied first place we have the Invasion and the War Games. They're just too good for me to say which is better. This season only has a small main cast of 3, with no new characters introduced, unlike the previous ones, and was the first to write all of them out. So I'll begin with Zoe, as she is the newbie of the season. So Zoe does go through an arc across this season, although it's kind of in the background and basically non-existent. By that I mean there is an arc she wants to go on, but she kind of ends it in the first serial of the season, bar the one occasion where she reverts to her previous less human state. This character arc for what it is of course erased by her loss of memories at the hands of the Time Lords, which is very unfortunate. But across this season she goes through a lot. She shows a lot more intelligence than her predecessors and is far less screamy. She's maybe not quite as well rounded as Victoria was, but her lack of screaming does really make her stand out against the rest. Now for Jamie, who with a total of 20 serials is at current the longest serving companion. Across the season he doesn't go through a lot of development, but continues on the same track he previously was on. The humour between him and the Doctor continues to be on point from the previous season. His dynamic with Zoe is also great. He doesn't have the same protective side that he had with Victoria, but has a similar dynamic. But due to her being far less fearful, it means that this side is less needed. As a duo of companions, the two of them work well to show both types of the possible companion types. The smart who can rival the Doctor, and the dumb who needs to learn but has a good heart. This pairing is probably what makes this season strong despite the varied serial quality. Finally we have the Doctor, who isn't much changed from season 5. The two most notable things about the Doctor in this season are the 2 extra long serials, which shows him in a bit of a different light. Notably him being unable to fool Vaughn in the invasion, and then the build-up to the introduction of the Time Lords. The build-up to the Time Lords in the War Games gives us some of the best we've seen from Troughton, entirely due to the fact that we're seeing a more scared side which hasn't really been shown off by the Doctor. While he isn't truly scared, there's a great sense of fear from him towards the end, before eventually giving up to them when he's captured. While it doesn't quite top Hartnell's performance at the end of 10th Planet, Troughton does really well to sell this new side of the Doctor. It's a strong ending to this incarnation. So overall this season was weaker than the previous one, much like with Hartnell's final season, where it's weak in terms of the scripts. Now that of course doesn't mean that there aren't any good serials, but I think this one feels a lot more average, with one of the worst ones towards the end. It has a very high concept idea for one of its serials, but it fails to deliver on that idea after the first episode. But most of the season is just fine overall, but its 2 best stories are 2 of the strongest in this era, and perhaps of the show so far. Due to this season being of a lower quality than the previous one, it means that the bar isn't as high as it has been, but with a changeover to colour and a brand new incarnation about to come in, the bar is still high, and in some ways perhaps higher than ever before.